Dear friends, welcome to another episode in the fantastic world of the military. In this video, we will discuss how Europe is preparing for what it sees as an inevitable conflict against Vladimir Putin's Russia. Last month, in March, the President of the European Council, Charles Michel, issued a grave warning about the future security of Europe, stating that if the European continent intends to maintain peace in the future, it must immediately transition to a wartime economy and continue to rapidly increase its defensive capabilities to confront what he classified as a serious threat from Russia. In his statement, Charles Michel said that if Europe does not mobilize to strengthen its defense and does not offer Ukraine all the support it needs to defend itself from the brutal Russian invasion, Europe will be the next target of Vladimir Putin. It is also said that he considers Russia a serious and real threat to the security of the European continent and global stability, further stating his certainty that if Putin is not stopped in Ukraine, he will continue spreading wars. Concluding his statement, he said that if we want peace, we must prepare for war. In previous statements, the President of the European Council said that the blame for the current situation lies with Europe itself, referring to nearly 30 years of significant disinvestment in the European defense sector following the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991. With the end of the Soviet threat, all European countries, without exception, cut back on defense investments, with particular emphasis on Germany, which between 2015 and 2018 invested on average less than 1.5% of its GDP in this important sector. This led to a situation where, despite European armies operating state-of-the-art equipment, the available quantity and primarily the readiness to employ these weapons and equipment reached an absurdly low and dangerous level. All this disinvestment reflected in the production capacity of the European defense industry, and once again, despite producing the most advanced equipment and weapons in the world, they are only able to do so in very limited quantities, in the context of a Europe at peace and without real enemies lurking around the corners. It was already a serious and worrying situation. But now, with a brutal and terrible war unfolding in the European continent, with Vladimir Putin's Russia deploying hundreds of thousands of soldiers against Ukraine with the sole purpose of conquering and annexing new territories, and with the Russians threatening to continue spreading wars throughout Europe if they emerge victorious from Ukraine, the weak capacity of the European defense industry takes on an authentically catastrophic character. This is what Charles Michel referred to as a transition to a wartime economy in Europe. A change that should involve the urgent expansion of European defense industries aiming at two main objectives. The first is to ensure a high level of domestic production of weapons and ammunition, mainly artillery, enough to keep European stocks full and ready for immediate use, with the second objective being to send to Ukraine all the weapons and ammunition it needs to defend itself from Russian aggression. During the event in which he spoke, European countries agreed to allocate an additional fund of $5.5 billion to be used for the purchase of weapons and ammunition in Europe, which will then be delivered to Ukraine, a fund inserted within the scope of the European Mechanism for Peace program, known by the acronym EPF. This program was created in March 2021 before the start of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, aiming to deliver military aid to partner countries. At its creation, the program received a budget of $5 billion. But on March 18th, the program received an additional budget of $5.5 billion to be used entirely for the purchase of weapons and ammunition for Ukraine. Many of the measures being taken now by Europe are a reflection of what is happening in the United States, with the Congress of that country controlled by Republicans and deeply influenced by Donald Trump, raising numerous barriers that are delaying vital American support for Ukrainian defense, highlighting a $61 billion package that should have been approved in November 2023, an approval that, primarily due to Trump's influence over Congress, promises not to come anytime soon. With US aid dwindling and even threatening to stop, Europe, as Charles Michel emphasized, is certain that Putin will continue to advance if he wins in Ukraine, seeing no alternative but to urgently resume its defense industry and take on the role of the main supporter of Ukrainian defense in a scenario of US withdrawal. For Europeans, what is happening in Ukraine represents the greatest security challenge to the continent since the terrible Second World War, a threat they know that if not stopped in Ukraine, which is where it currently is, will have to be faced later on European territory, in an even more terrible conflict than the current one. As the President of the European Council said in his speech, if Europe wants peace, then it must prepare for war. And if you are not yet subscribed to the channel, subscribe and activate the notification bell to not miss any news, criticisms, ideas, or suggestions. You can leave them in the comments.